Cosplayland. I am Alice, and today I bring you a video a little bit different. If you have seen any of my previous videos, you will have noticed I am always surrounded by a lot of cool gadgets, a fancy sewing table, and I also have a studio dedicated only to sewing. And of course, all this is very convenient, but I realize not everybody necessarily has all this, and you don't really need it. This summer, like every summer, I went back to Spain to visit my family and spend some time with them and to enjoy the nice weather. However, here I do not have any fancy machines nor aesthetic backgrounds, but that never stopped me in the past, and it shouldn't stop you either. I gathered the materials for my cosplay, moved a few things, and I was ready to start sewing. I started by cutting the lining for my dress. This fabric is actually leftovers from my bedroom's curtains. Then I cut the skirt and the bodice of my dress on cheap cotton. Remember that you will need to add seam allowances if you are using my patterns, which I will link in the description. Any object will do to keep those patterns down, so you can cut them easily. Always place your patterns on the folded fabric so you get a symmetric piece for each side. And don't forget to use fabric scissors, which are the best ones to cut fabric. The front pieces are placed on the fold so there is no seam at the center, but they will still look symmetrical. And don't forget to mark any notches that will help in the construction of the dress. With all the pieces cut, it's time to assemble them. I started with the bodice, and I aligned the notches at the bust first before I made the rest of it fit. Place your pieces right sides together and pin them in the right position. At first it may seem they do not fit, but if you slightly manipulate your fabric into shape, they will. Once the front pieces were ready, I sewed them with my sewing machine. I did the same for the back, which was a simple straight line. Once the front and back were done, I joined them at the sides. And I also joined the front and back of my skirt. As I forgot to buy ribbon, I made some with a rectangle of fabric. And of course, along the way, I ironed all my seams open for a clean finish. I didn't even have an ironing table here, so I had to improvise with some old towels, but hey, as I said, it may not be the most comfortable thing in the world, and it's probably much easier and better to do it at home, but I still enjoyed the process and used whatever I had at hand. For my homemade ribbon, I trimmed the excess fabric before I turned the loops with a stirring stick. I I made sure to pull all the corners out and gave it a final pass with the iron to make sure everything lay flat. It was time to gather the fabric sewing 2 rows with the longest stitch, which of course I placed on the wrong side the first time. Simply pull from the bobbin threads and gathers will magically appear on your fabric. It is important to distribute them evenly if you want a nice finish. And you also want to match the sides of your bodice to the sides of your skirt. I temporarily attached the ribbons to the bodice with a zigzag stitch. And it was time to repeat all the previous steps to make the lining. In my case, I decided to make a full lining for the skirt as well, but you don't really need to do the skirt, so it's totally up to you if you just want to attach the end of the bodice to your dress. Right sides together, I placed my lining on top of the dress and sewed the top, making sure those straps are looking inwards. And it will be much easier to trim the seam allowance before you turn your fabric for a crisp finish. Don't forget to clip the center front as well. As usual, I prepared my invisible zipper by ironing it open. But here I didn't have the right foot for my machine, so I had to settle with a normal zipper foot. Then I just had to close the back of my dress and I was almost done. With the lining around the zipper, I sewed this part as well. And same as before, I also closed the end of the lining skirt. A good press will help setting the fabric in the correct place. This is the key for a nice cosplay and a nice finish in general when you are sewing. Finally, I ironed the hem before I sew it too. And now, let's do something fancy. This is the kind of thing I can do back at home. To be honest, I'm using a cutting machine which is almost 10 years old, so it's not really that fancy. It's quite old and I used it for crafting, but yeah, I wanted to be a bit extra with my very simple cosplay, and I used this machine to cut some vinyl with some templates that I made and that you can also find on my Patreon. You can use an X-Acto knife instead if you are at home, and you can also use a simple iron to do this. Simply peel away all the excess vinyl, and this comes with some kind of heat transfer adherence that you only need to heat in order to stick it to any fabric. It's like magic, honestly. I am customizing this sport bag that I found on Amazon, and I used the heat mat to protect the interior before I placed the heat transfer vinyl in place. I also covered the area with a Teflon sheet and used my heat press to stick it into place. This material was a bit tricky and the result wasn't perfect, but I managed to fix it with a bit of acrylic paint. Remember, you can always fix your mistakes, and most of the time you will be the only one that notices them. One final peel and my sports bag was done. And this is the final result. It is not as flashy as other costumes I have made in the past, but it was a nice little project and I made it with very simple resources. Of course, you can always level your cosplay up and use your fancy machines for some parts, but they are not essential to make a cosplay look good. Thank you so much to my patrons for being so patient with me while I saw this project. It took a bit longer than expected, but that is cosplay in general. It takes as long as it takes and you just have to deal with it. And if you also want to support me, remember you can join my community on Patreon, get these and many other patterns on my store, or simply click the like button on this video. Your likes and comments go a long way. I will be back with more crazy projects very soon. Until then, see you in the next adventure. Bye!